You also heard the judge's thoughts on whether or not Murdaugh's financial issues should be brought in this trial. And this stems from hearing from Jeannie Seckinger, the CFO of the law firm, this morning about Murdaugh's misappropriation of funds. And that was testimony not heard by the jury. And with that as the backdrop, I'm joined alongside criminal defense attorney Josh Ritter. Josh, can you break down what we just heard outside the presence of the jury for us viewers?
Sure, and it's really exciting, fascinating stuff from a spectator's point of view, but this is why it's so important to have cameras inside the courtroom, and why a network like Law and Crime is so important to show people that this is really where the trial is being done. It's in these outside of the jury hearings where they talk about what evidence is going to come in front of the jury, what is going to be the landscape of the evidence. So what's being argued about here is the prosecution is saying, listen, we're allowed to prove motive. And part of the motive is understanding what was going on in this man's life and how hectic it was and all of the financial crisis he was under. The defense is saying, hey, no, what you're trying to do is bring in a bunch of other stuff to dirty up our client and basically have a trial on his character to show what a bad person he was otherwise. Therefore, you're hoping that the jurors will convict him because they just believe him to be a bad person. And the analysis that has to be done here by the judge is he's weighing what is called the probative value of the evidence versus how prejudicial it is, and whether or not to bring in these other prior bad acts evidence is what they call it. So the judge is saying, listen, I'm going to have to hear more about this. You're going to have to argue to me more about, have you done this proper argument on weighing the probative versus prejudicial value? Because what the judge doesn't want to have happen is exactly what I said, is to become a character trial, which could lead to problems and would lead to problems on appeal.
Well, what did you think of the prosecution and defense's arguments outside the presence of the jury? Did you think both sides had justified points?
I think the prosecution has a good point in saying, listen, it's important for the jurors to understand kind of holistically what was going on in this man's life. And so therefore you need to understand the economic pressures he was under, financial pressures he was under. But they need to be careful about how much they ask for. And so I think they would be wise to kind of, and it seems like they're doing that, argue to the judge, well, give us a little bit, give us enough to give some insight to the jurors. The defense needs to be pounding their hands on the table saying none of this is relevant. All of this has to go towards prejudice. All of this is just attacking his character. None of it is important and probative towards why we're here on whether or not he committed these murders. I think the judge is probably going to split the baby, as it were, and allow some of it in to give kind of the surrounding circumstances of when this crime was committed so that the jurors can understand, did he in fact have a motive? Because that really is a huge question that's going to be in the jurors' minds. It's not something the prosecution has to answer in order to prove the crime, but it's something they're going to need to provide at least something for these jurors to hang their hats on.
Well, speaking of relevance, how relevant was Parker Law Firm CFO Jeannie Seckinger's testimony here? Do you believe that the prosecution's arguments that Murdaugh's alleged financial schemes could really lead to murder?
That to me has always been a problem. It's a weird theory for motive for murder, right? For killing your family members is what we're talking about. Here's this man who's from this prestigious family, and you're going to say that he murdered his wife and child because I don't know what, he was experiencing financial troubles, or he wanted to garner sympathy with the community, or he was hoping to distract people from the investigations into his financial matters. It's all a little vague to me and not extremely straightforward, but I still think it is important for the jurors to understand that, hey, you know, people do crazy things when they're experiencing financial troubles. This was part of his life. It is true that it was going on, but we can't let it lead into one of those trials within a trial where now the defense is arguing, you know, how much of this embezzlement is true, and you're getting on this long in the weeds sidetrack that could, like the judge said, you know, bring us on a 2-week sidetrack on this trial that doesn't have anything to really do with the murders themselves.
Well, one thing's for sure, some very interesting developments happening in court today.